Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. My name is Pat with Like Attracts Like Evolution Mentorships. And today we're going to talk about something I feel is very, very important and that affects most human beings, especially around this time of year. We're going to talk about how do we know when we are ready to move on from something that is no longer serving us. Today we're going to talk about 3 very powerful reasons that human beings don't move on or prevent themselves from moving on or won't let go of things inside of their story that could actually offer some relief. Stick around, we're diving in deep when we come back. All right, so how do we know when it's time to move on? What is this unseen calling? What is this unseen force that causes a person to really say, like, I've had it, I am done with this? And so before we get started, I feel like one of the main things that can happen inside of someone's reality is like there's typically an event. There's usually an event that happens that really is the culmination, I call it a final boss, of so many of the things that we've been struggling with or suffering with. It's something in the world that represents the end-all be-all of a limiting belief system that we've held for so long, and we are just done experiencing it. We are done dealing with this in our life, and we are ready to move on from it. But really, what are the reasons that we don't? Why don't human beings let go of things that no longer serve them? So today I want to jump right in and see if we can't shift some of these things today. The first reason that somebody wouldn't move on from something is because they are not consciously aware of what the lesson is inside of the story that they've been living. And when we're not consciously aware or taking responsibility for these things, then we will point the finger outside of ourselves at the person, place, or thing inside of the story and give it responsibility. So when we are living in a relationship that doesn't reflect the fullness of who we believe we are or who we want to be or how we want to be treated, if we're not ready to look inside of ourselves and see where our story is affecting our ability to manage or set boundaries for our own value system, our own sense of worth, then we will point our finger at the human being in the world or the situation in the world that represents the lack of value we hold for ourselves back to us. Again, life and reality is a mirror of your internal dialogue, your story. We get to literally subjectively live the story that we tell ourselves perpetually every single day. And if we're not ready to take responsibility for the story that we tell, because we're either not aware of it, not diving down into our subconscious enough between the gatekeeper of our shadow self, if we're not ready to do that, then we'll point fingers in the outside world and say that you were the reason and you were the reason and that is the reason. It's very much the life is happening to me aspect, and it's a victim mentality that can be the first phase of what we need to uncover to actually release and move on from the limiting story that we've been telling. When we see enough of it in the world, we use the story to confirm why we feel the way we feel, instead of realizing that we are the source of how we should feel and want to feel, and that by changing the internal world and dialogue, your external world will shift. The second reason we might not be moving through or moving beyond something that we are ready to move on from is because we are still giving power to a person, place, or thing. We're still emotionally attached to it. So even after we get past phase 1 and we're like, okay, I am self-aware enough, I am aware that this is my inner dialogue, that I've been saying that I don't feel valuable, I don't feel worthy, I'm not enough. I understand that the story I've been telling, I'm finally aware of it. So I've gone past 1, I'm ready to move on. The second layer of this is realizing that in your world, in your reality, your story has been physically manifesting and manifested, and you're walking around inside of that reality every single day. So the relationships that you keep or still keep, if you haven't been able to set boundaries in the past because you weren't aware of your own insecurities, then the relationships that you allow and the people that you have next to you and the situations that you tolerate in the world are going to reflect your old belief systems about you. So even after you uncover your belief systems, we have to be aware and cognizant of the fact that we're going to be walking around in a world with a new belief system up here that is ready to move on from this stuff, but still may be emotionally attached to characters or situations or results in the physical world that represent the old belief system. So what that means is we have to be courageous enough to release the emotional attachment and power that we've given to the person, place, or thing that represent the old story. We have to make new choices that represent our actual physical ability to believe what we now believe so much that we're willing to take a physical action in the world to show this energy grid that we're ready to move on from the old story, the old limiting belief system. If someone represents old boundaries that you would people please or you would tolerate in your life because you had a lower self image, a lower self-worth before. When you are presented with this new character in the world, we have to make a new choice to set a new boundary or a new position from our new belief system, and that action in the world will actually dissipate that relationship. We have to be okay letting go of older relationships because they don't represent the new vision that we have for ourselves. And this is where, again, we have to have faith and trust to know that sometimes the people that represent our old version, that security blanket that we had of not feeling enough and victim storying back and forth and that lower frequency energy, sometimes we have to let that go and be brave enough and confident enough to know that if it's meant for us, it will come back. And the only way really to do that is to release the emotional attachment you had at a lower frequency to whatever that person, place, or thing represented in your life. But if you can do that, if you can trust and you can find that place inside, that space inside of you that knows that this needs to get done in order for you to move beyond this story that you've been telling and beyond the results or the reality you've been living, then you will see, and I found very, very, very powerfully for myself and with others that I'm fortunate enough to work with all over the world, that what is meant for you will come back. What is meant for you will come back, and you will be that much closer to actually moving on from something that is no longer serving you. The third thing that can prevent someone from moving on that we need to learn how to shift beyond is the no joke, most powerful, but also what I believe and I found for myself the most difficult to do, because here's how this works. First, it is a mental construct. We have to get the other versions of us who have suffered perpetually through our lives, through these traumatic events, through these limiting belief system experiences, through projections from other people and fear, and limitation and lack of worth and struggle and failure. All of the versions of us that have led us to who you are now in this moment, you have struggled through various versions of you and experiences. And if we don't like what happened, we push it down, we suppress it. We don't want the world to know. We don't even want us to be aware of it. And that's why they call it the shadow self. As you shift closer and closer to the light, which I will call your inner light, your inner sense of self and God or the universe or whatever you call it, this magnificent energy that's inside of you that you're starting to cultivate more and more, as you connect more and more to that light, what's going to happen is the shadow versions of you that you push down from fear that are preventing you from moving on by recreating all of these scenarios you're unhappy with, they're going to start to come out and they're going to start to want to be seen and heard and validated. These versions of you that experience these traumatic events are looking for someone in the world to represent that which they needed at the time. And they were looking for someone outside of you at the time to heal you, to save you, to make you feel amazing, not realizing, here's the illusion and the trick, that you are the version that you have been looking for. I know, Hallmark card, it's an inspirational movie. This is what's happening. This is in reality what's happening. The versions of you that were looking for safety and security and validation and worth outside of you, when they didn't get it because you didn't believe fully enough in who you are yet, when it didn't get those things that you were looking from the mirror, from reality, because you can't, because you're the source of it, when you don't get those things, we suppress them, and the shadow versions of us build and build and build until that energy is so much that it literally creates scenarios in the world representing the shadow. And it's not to punish you. It's not to cause this, unbelievable suffering. It's so that you can realize the illusion and pull the veil over and go, I get it. I get it. I get it. I am the source. I am giving these things power. So once we realize this and this unbelievably liberating conscious awakening, now what is left is we think sometimes that because I'm aware of it, I can just move on and just make new choices. But what I found is the truth is that these versions of us that suffered are still there. They're still inside. There's still emotional, cellular attachment to these versions of us that suffered. And they need to know it's okay to move on because they don't know why they suffered. They don't know what happened. They don't have the realization that you do. We think we do because oh, I get it. But no, you are multiple versions of yourself existing in one current moment consciously. And we have to go back. This is sometimes called shadow work, but this is kind of going to be a different aspect of shadow work, a more extreme, I guess, version of it, where you have to, in order to truly move on from something, we have to go and realize that there are versions of ourselves that are not ready to move on because they haven't felt that validation yet, because they're still consciously searching for it in the world. When you, who you are now, who is now ready to be the person to move on from these things, realize that the only reason you're having trouble is because of still an attachment to an older version of you, or a story that you used to tell, or a belief system that you used to have. We have to go back and visit those versions of us that suffered. So when I made a terrible decision back 10 years ago because I felt worthless and I didn't feel secure, and I was treating other people poorly in relationships and allowing myself to be treated poorly in relationships, just because I get it now and I'm like, oh, I have to love myself and treat myself better, I'm ready to move on and find a healthy relationship. If I don't go back and tell 10 years ago me that the person we were looking for is here, and we don't need validation from someone else. We were just doing that as an illusion because we didn't feel value inside of ourselves. So we gave someone else responsibility to make us feel okay. And when they didn't do that, then we wilded out and we treated them bad and we had a bad day that day. When we realize now that we're the source of it and everything is a reflection of us, we have to go back. I have to go back and tell that person like, it's okay now. The person that you were looking for is here, and I'm willing to be that person that actually walks forward in the world as the version that I was looking for. I have to embody it. I have to be it. And we explain basically to the universe that we're ready to be it by the choices that we make. So this is going to be a constant evolution of making positive choices in the world that represent the version of yourself that you want to be, that convince all of the other versions of you that suffered that you actually are the version that they were looking for. They will stop looking for validation in the world, and you will start to actually integrate all of those versions of the shadow inside of your world, inside of your reality, until you can go back in your experience and get a confirmation. And I mean this, I mean literally visit the versions of you that struggled. We all know what traumatic events we went through if we're willing to uncover them. And you can go back to each version and say, are you ready? Do you give permission for us to move on through this to the next level? Because I understand that you're scared. I understand that you are hesitant. I understand that you don't trust yourself or me because I haven't been making the best choices. Do you understand that I'm ready to do that now? But I need you to come along with me in order for us to make this work. If you can't get a yes from every single version of you, I mean, an authentic yes, you'll know, you'll feel if they're not ready, then you have to go back and revisit that situation, or you have to make new choices that allow those versions of you to trust. When you can get a yes from all of the versions of you that suffered and built the story that is in your mind that you are now uncovering and ready to move beyond, if you can't get a yes, then you'll keep living loops until you do, until you make enough positive choices in the world that those versions of you that suffered and are hesitant and weary, that they finally believe in you now, not because of what you're saying or what you're thinking, but because of what you're doing in the world, the actions that you're taking in the world. You will get these versions of you on the same page, and they will all give you a high five. And this is how your demons become your best friend. Getting everybody on board to say yes when you say, I'm ready to move on and be this, and then actually showing up in the world and being that. That is how you move on successfully without constantly falling in to the patterns and loops of the mind, because it's not enough that we uncover it and become aware of it in the mind. We have to realize how that story got there. We have to revisit the past versions of us that were involved in creating the story and the belief systems that we'd allowed for so long. And we have to let go of power from the reality that we created from fear and from the illusion of a lack of self-worth, realizing that you are worthy. You always were. This is the trick. This is the illusion. You always were. We're so powerful in the world that we can create the illusion that we're powerless. So look at the illusion of powerlessness in the world, and then know that it was created from a lie that you weren't ready to release yet. But once you're ready to release the lie and sit in your worthiness, just like every single other human being has the same equivalent worthiness within them, we're just realizing the lie at different times and different levels in our life. If we all realize the lie, you'll see how connected we truly are. And when you see how connected we truly are, it will be very, very easy of you to let go of your own story, plus allow other people to have their story in their world and help them shift along the way by being it. That is how you actually successfully move on from something. I hope these things helped you realize how powerful you truly are, some of the things that might be hanging you up. And I just want to offer a little bonus tip here, if I can. sometimes we get trapped in a loop of the mind because we are scared to put things down on paper as to why we are actually experiencing what we're experiencing. We don't want to put it down on paper because then it becomes reality. Whereas if it's in our mind, it's our own and no one knows and it's hidden. Again, keeping it in the shadow. So just as a bonus tip, I like to teach and offer something that really worked powerfully for me, and that is to get a piece of paper. You could burn it, you can rip it, you could do whatever you want with it after, but be brave enough to put down whatever you might be struggling with on paper so you could see the lie firsthand. And when you can do that and see the lie firsthand, then you will actually be able to take it to the next step, which is making choices in the world that are the opposite of what that lie represents. That is what I wish for each and every single one of you. I wish you guys the absolute best of luck with this. Have an amazing day, a wonderful night, and I'll see you next time.